Hello, it's Thursday morning. That means Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter, mostly Scott Ritter, as I always say, are going to have plenty to say. Let's talk. All right, so Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter, and as you probably know, my job is to throw a nice slow pitch over the plate, and his job is to knock it over the left field fence. And lucky thing for me, because when I played baseball, as my old coach used to say, I couldn't hit a grapefruit with a snow shovel. So we got lots going on. Don't forget, before this gets started, go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com for all of Scott's good work. And while you're there, remember, everybody online here who's doing this work, who's, get Scott here, he's on every Ukrainian threatened website known to man. We've got to, of course, keep the lights on. And he's got Maverick running around who's going to bite somebody if there's not enough food in the bowl. So make sure you help Scott and Maverick continue to do their great work. He has a guard dog. That whole Miro Vets thing. Maverick is perched at the front door, just waiting for some Ukrainian hitman to come through the door so he can tear him to shreds. So we got to make sure.
So he can run straight to my lap and lead the hitman to me.
Right, exactly. Oh, he's over here. Well, come on. He'll wag his tail, sniff his hand a couple times. At any rate, scottritterextra.com, and while you're there, make sure you donate. Make sure you hit the donate buttons in every way you can. All right, Scott, let's start here. Before this goes any further, before we get into anything of depth, let's get into something that has not much depth. Victoria Nuland. One of the things that I recall reading many times about Victoria Nuland is that she was heavily involved in the offensive, that she was involved in, and I thought to myself, well, no wonder it failed, because it wasn't a military operation, it was a political operation. And if you try to do a political operation in a military sphere, you're going to get what they got. So at any rate, your thoughts on Victoria Nuland. I got lots of other questions a few other questions about that, but let's start with you. Your raw thoughts on this whole weird things. All of a sudden something is released that by the Russians, then she's gone a week later. Were they related? Scott Ritter.
Well, I mean, Victoria Nuland is the architect of the current policy. I mean, even Tony Blinken, in his letter announcing her intention to resign, which is an interesting choice of words. He said she is Ukraine policy, and it's not just for the Biden administration. She's been doing this for 6 presidents. Not Ukraine policy, but she's been doing, this very hardcore, forward-leaning, neoconservative type policy for 6 presidential administrations. She has recently said that the Russia today is not the Russia we wanted, which tells you that she has been seeking, a policy that will transform Russia from the inside out, regime change policy, which the other thing this does is exposes a lie, as everything the United States has been doing since the Bush administration. The Bush administration was saying that we can, you remember George W. Bush, I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw the man's soul. And Putin's like, okay, thank you. But the whole point was Bush is saying these words, but meanwhile, people like Victoria Nuland are actively plotting to, kick Putin out. I just want to remind everybody that the election cycle of 2007, 2008, where Putin and Medvedev were going to do their famous swap, was targeted by the CIA and the State Department as a window of opportunity to keep Putin out of office forever. The feeling was that he was vulnerable when Putin when we were going to do this swap. In order to make this swap work, United Russia the first thing that had to happen is United Russia Putin's party, even though he's not a member of the party, it's the party that he's affiliated with, had to win the parliament. And so the CIA and the State Department, Victoria Nuland, just want to make sure everybody understands what's going on here, tried to get people like Alexei Navalny to carry out a color revolution in 2005, 2006 to try and block United Russia from taking control of the parliament, therefore disrupting the plan, because if United Russia doesn't control the parliament, Putin can't be appointed prime minister by the president. And then to focus on the presidential election and try to empower Dmitry Medvedev, whom the United States viewed as the weak link. If you could divorce Medvedev from Putin as prime minister from a United Russia-controlled parliament, Medvedev could then become Yeltsin 2.0. That was the whole strategy. Block Putin, neuter the parliament, promote Medvedev as Yeltsin 2.0. And it didn't work. United Russia won. Putin was appointed. Medvedev became president. And then they spent the next 4 years trying to get Medvedev to do their business. That's her. This is where we get the McFaul reset. Now, Michael McFaul, former national security Russia expert for Barack Obama, later the U.S. ambassador to Russia under Barack Obama. McFaul is influenced by Nuland. McFaul's an academic. He has ideas, but the ideas get translated into policy by people like Victoria Nuland. So McFaul is out there espousing, words about the reset. She's all about regime change, straight up regime change. And you take a look at what we were doing in Russia from 2008 until the 2011, 2012 election cycle, another very important election cycle. Americans, you guys got to really go and read your history and understand what's going on here. We've been seeking to overthrow Vladimir Putin straight up, and Victoria Nuland's taken point on that. We tried to corrupt Medvedev. We tried to empower people like Navalny. I have an article coming out hopefully today that talks about Navalny's experience at Yale and the role that Michael McFaul played in this, and how it relates to what we tried to accomplish in 2011, 2012, because that's the next window of vulnerability. It's the swap back. It's like that movie Face Off, where you got Nicolas Cage and John Travolta swapping faces, and now they got to swap their faces back. And so we have Face Off in Russia. We got the prime minister's got to take back Medvedev's face, and the president's got to take back Putin's face. But again, 2011, in order to make this happen, United Russia has to win at the polls. If they don't, then Medvedev cannot be appointed prime minister, and he might be compelled to say to Putin, I'm going to challenge you. I'm not going to let you come back into office. That's what we wanted. And again, Navalny, Kasparov, all these players are out there doing their thing to undermine Putin, to promote Medvedev. In 2011, I just want people, here we are in an election cycle here in America. Imagine, if you would, Dmitry Medvedev, number 2 man in National Security Council, flying to Washington, D.C. Now, we wouldn't let him because of the thing, but just imagine for a second that he did fly there, and he met with all the MAGA people, but it wasn't just MAGA people. These were MAGA people that were being paid by the Russians. We know that they're not being, but let's just imagine that they were. That the whole MAGA movement was a Russian intelligence effort to undermine Joe Biden's reelection, because that's what Biden went and met with the opposition, who were all paid for by the United States government. He met them in Moscow, and he said, I don't think it won't be good for Russia if Putin becomes president again, and it won't be good for Putin. Now imagine if Medvedev came here and said, it won't be good for America if Joe Biden becomes president, gets reelected, and it won't be good for Biden either. But I have a consolation. We'll make Joe Biden the president of the International Olympic Committee. Now you'd say that's just about it. But they said, we'll make Biden. He said, we'll make Putin the president of the International Olympic Committee. As if Putin would go, really?
Oh man.
I want to jump at that. The stupidity of Biden, the stupidity of the American government, the stupidity of Victoria Nuland. That regime change effort failed again, swapped back. And this time Putin began cracking down. This is how Navalny ended up in jail, things of that nature, because it's CIA funded regime change. So now they go for the next phase, because the idea was to have a weak Russian president. And to weaken Russia further, because it's not just about taking control of Russia. Everybody has to understand this is about the destruction of Russia. This is about the breakup of Russia. And one way you achieve the breakup is that you weaken Russia peripherally. And Ukraine was in the sight. So now Victoria Nuland's master plan, 2014, the Maidan coup, she became known as the Cookie Monster, I guess, for handing out cookies. This was her plan, and she got caught with a leaked conversation. We'll get to that in a second, the new leaked conversation. But she got caught in the leaked conversation with the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. I think Piat was his name, where she basically is handpicking the future government of Ukraine. This is before the Nazis came in and started the violence. She's saying, Yats is our man, and all this stuff. And then the CIA made the Nazis get guns. They killed 100 people. The rest is history. Now we're on this path to conflict. One of the things that people don't understand about what happened in 2014, it wasn't just to put the nationalists back in power. Remember, the nationalists were in power in 2005 because of the color revolution, which Victoria Nuland was responsible for or played a part of. But it was to destroy the pro-Russian political movement. You see, the nationalists came back in power. They had an illegal, unconstitutional third round of elections to get Yushchenko put in, but then Yushchenko couldn't stay on. The pro-Russian political party, or the party that had Russian sympathies, brought back Yanukovych, who had won in 2004, but was thrown out by an illegal third round. Yanukovych came in, and now. And so what happened in 2010, and what happened is the United States said we can't have this. We need to not only push him out of power, but we need to make sure that the nationalists never again the Russians are never able again to have a pro-Russian president. So they declared war on the Russians. They declared war on the party of regions, I think it was, and that's the other thing that was happening. Nobody talks about it. The war that was declared by the nationalists on the Russians of Ukraine to destroy them politically. This was a CIA plan, a Victoria Nuland plan to neuter Ukraine, weaken Putin. And at the same time she's doing this, this is where Navalny is supposed to be doing his magic to undermine Putin, but it's not working because he's going to jail. But the whole point is this is all supposed to be balanced. This is regime change carried out by Victoria Nuland, the Russia we want, which is a weak Russia, not governed by Vladimir Putin. And the more things go bad, the more they double down. Again, people say, Minsk. We keep talking about Minsk, the ceasefire. Well, we now know not only did the Germans and the French, who were the original signatories to Minsk, they admit now is a sham. They never intended there to be peace. But the CIA, we now know, was building 12 bases along the Ukrainian-Russian border to project Ukrainian power into Ukraine, to destabilize Russia, to bring down Vladimir Putin. Regime change. That's what Victoria Nuland wanted. It wasn't about diplomacy, about covert action. She was all about covert action. So now when we talk about how this war started, understand this war started because Victoria Nuland wanted there to be a war. This war was supposed to weaken Russia. This war was supposed to create the conditions for crippling economic sanctions. It was supposed to destroy the Russian economy. The Ukrainian military, while it wasn't there to defeat the Russians, was supposed to do enough damage to the Russians so that the public rose up against this war, rose up against the sanctions, and overthrew Vladimir Putin. That was the goal. That was the objective. And the United States has been doubling down on that ever since. And Victoria Nuland's been at the forefront of every time. Look, we now know, another Ukrainian ambassador has come out about the Istanbul communique, the peace guarantee from March, the peace treaty agreement from April 2022. And he's sitting there saying, this was the best thing. And this is a Ukrainian ambassador saying this was the best thing in the world. He said, Vladimir Putin was seriously committed to bringing a peaceful end to this war. and he was doing things that never in our wildest imaginations we thought that he would put on paper. But he really, really he was bending over backwards to make this war come to an end. Nope, Victoria Nuland, nope, Boris Johnson, we're not going to do it. War. Why? Because we want Russia to collapse from within. What's happened is everything that Victoria Nuland wanted to happen didn't happen. Not only that, Russia got stronger. And now the things that she was doing to continue this policy, this irresponsible action, such as encouraging the British and the French to not only provide the cruise missiles, the Scalp and the Storm Shadow, but to use them aggressively against Russian targets in an effort to demoralize the Russian people, to pressure the Germans to put the Taurus missile in, to strike strategic targets, to get the Russian people demoralized, again, to create the Moscow Maidan moment. It's out there, but the United States, Tony Blinken and everybody else is looking back and saying, this ain't working. This just isn't working. It's not happening. We can't even get Congress to release the funding. And I think they realize now, we're in that presidential silly season, and everybody has to evaluate everything that goes on right now from that perspective. Mike Johnson has locked up money, and he's using it as leverage against Joe Biden on perhaps what is his weakest domestic political issue, border security in the South. That money will not get released. Now that Trump has sewn up the Republican nomination, there's no way Mike Johnson steps back from this hardline policy. So that money will not be going. And now the Biden administration is saying, how do we adjust from this? How do we do this? And yet now you have Macron making ridiculous statements about sending troops in. You have this leaked conversation about, the Germans and the Taurus missile, and Victoria Nuland coming up and saying, that the money will be released, and there will be surprises for the Russians in the near future. Chackle, cuckle, da, da. And I think basically she was pulled in. This is now my assessment. She was pulled in and told, no, we're doing a dramatic rethink on Ukrainian policy. We need this war to come to an end. We need, unfortunately, your grand strategy that you've been trying to do for the last decade ain't going to get done. We need to jettison that policy. Are you on board? And she said, nope. And they went, well, then what has to happen.
You're said, overboard.
Here's my letter of resignation. So she's out because her plans, her scheming, the things that she's been trying to accomplish for more than a decade aren't going to be accomplished. The United States is rethinking its strategic approach to Ukraine, and her views are no longer compatible with the strategic direction that the Biden administration wants to take.
As far as the leak thing, here, let me give you a couple of quick thoughts, and then I'll throw it back to you. The Russians said it was some like commercially available app, or that whoever it was, we don't know, it was the Russians, whoever it was, hacked. My first thoughts is this: there's no way I'd tell them where I hacked it. I'd just make something. Yeah, it was commercially available. It could have been microphones in the room. It could have been any number of things. But if I'm an intelligence person worth my salt, I'm not going to tell you where I got the info. I'm just going to say, yeah, it was a commercially available app, or whatever the case may be. Number one. Number two, I think the Europeans and the Americans got to be shivering in their boots, because here's what I think to myself. They got that recordings of that, whoever it is, if it's the Russians, the Chinese, the Singapore people, whatever, they've written out a text of what was there. That ain't all they got. They've been listening for a long time, and when I find out that they've been in the room for a long time, and they know way more than these people thought they knew. And so I'd be thinking, holy crap. I'd be talking to my people saying, what have you said over the phone? What have you said online? Damn it, these people know everything, number one. Number two, one other thing. So, is it possible that somewhere in what the Russians intercepted was something about Nuland that got her done? I've suspected that maybe somewhere in there, let's say she was saying, as she loves to say, F Joe Biden and Blinken. This is what we're going to do. I'm coming there. Here, look, Pistorius, you guys, you're going to attack the bridge. I talked to the French. They're going to send people in. Well, Joe Biden and Blinken told us, don't screw them. Don't listen to them. I'm in charge of this. You know what I'm saying? Is it possible that maybe some information got back to the machine that, hey, look, here's the recordings. You guys do with it what you want. I just think possibly it's consequential that these things come out and she's gone a week later. And that I know that wasn't all the Russians had. I know, and one other thing, and however they are hacking them, however they're getting the Russians or whoever, there's no way they give that up. If I'm in charge of that, I'd say, well, we can't release this stuff because then they'll know we're listening, unless it was something that I had that was so big that it's worth giving it up. It's got to be huge. So anyway, throwing all that at you, you're an intelligence guy, Scott. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I agree with a couple things. One, I agree that the Russians have much more than this. And one of the reasons why I agree with you is that Margarita Simeon, the editor-in-chief of RT, has said, we got more than this. Whoever did this was doing it for a while, just like you said. And the implication is she's got Schultz in a compromising position as well. And one of the interesting things about releasing this information isn't just what was contained in there, but as you said, an indication of the vulnerability of that particular, web-based, conferencing system that was being used. And if the Germans look back on that vulnerability, they go, oh, no, they've been. But here's where I have a little. I don't think Russian intelligence had anything to do with this at all.
Okay.
Because if they did, we wouldn't know about it.
Gotcha.
Because no matter what happens, the Germans are never going to use that WebEx platform again. That's done. So if that was your window, if you had found a backdoor into that, you wouldn't give that up. It's too valuable a stream of intelligence. You're just not going to give that up. Plus, if you go through the Snowden, I have to be really careful how I say things right now, but if you go through the Snowden documents, Snowden talks about a Russian journalist who was killed. And he talks about indication that the NSA had about the Russian FSB maybe following her, tracking her. But what he said there, and again, this is just Snowden speaking, I don't give any attribution to it, but he said that, the Russian intelligence just doesn't leave any fingerprints, no fingerprints at all. He said that's just part of their tradecraft. They just don't leave fingerprints. So I'm going to take Edward Snowden at face value on this one. And that if the Russian intelligence service was involved, there will be no fingerprints. And we see that with the DNC hacking. There were two hacks that took place. I don't know if people understand that. The DNC back in 2016 was hacked twice. One was probably by the Russian intelligence service. And this is the hack where the NSA and the FBI are going, something happened here, but we don't know what happened because there's no fingerprints. And I'm going, that means that the big boys were involved. And then there's the one where we're going, oh, they're using this and they're using that and they're using this. And of course, all the idiots are going, that's the GRU, that's this. No, there is a class of hacker that Vladimir Putin calls patriotic Russians. And these are non-governmental affiliated people who are being controlled by the government. So there's an SVR or a FSB supervisor that comes in and says, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? But these guys are on their own. They're in a room and they're just doing their little magic, going in there, and everyone saw, hey, ding, 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 they hit the button. The FSB comes in and goes, that's pretty cool. We'll take that. But the problem is the thing is, it'll be attributed to them, not to the FSB, because the FSB, if they're doing it, there won't be any fingerprints. This particular penetration, we know that somebody logged in. This is what kills me. Somebody logged in and was just hanging out. And the Germans are like, because it's there in the logs. It's anonymous user is logged in. The Germans are like, all right, let's just keep talking this top secret crap. And the anonymous user is going, could you imagine being a Russian hacker, waking up in the morning, down on your monster, and punk kid with listening to his rock and roll music, and he's just, oh, WebEx, they're gonna kick me out because that's what hackers. Oh, they booted me out.
Exactly.
Oh, they booted me out. Oh, they booted me out. They didn't boot me out. They're talking about, and you just see his eyes going.
And he hits record. He's hit record.
Just sitting there, doing whatever hackers do when they score a touchdown. But but apparently they've been doing that touchdown because now the hackers said, because this isn't the first time. Remember, they've been doing this for a while. So he just is coming in, and I just have to imagine that there's the equivalent of me behind him going, "Bull, you didn't do that. No way." And I'm sitting there watching him, and he goes, and he slides in, and I'm going, "Wait a minute, what was the password? 1, 2, 3, 4?" And they're not. Holy cow! You're just sitting there going, "How could they be so stupid?" But the point is, in this business, in the world we live in, everybody's that stupid.
Right.
Everybody's the president of the United States is that stupid. Barack Obama was that stupid. Donald Trump was that stupid.
Remember, what's his name? Hillary's chief of staff, whose password was password.
Password. They're all because they get at this rarefied air, and they just assume that because they're so powerful, and that they can get away with anything. The communication security is for the little guy, not for me. And next thing you know, you password 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody slides in. Nobody's doing a screen. You don't have the equivalent of me sitting there, monitoring the whole thing, looking at all the activity, making sure everything's encrypted, making sure that there's no, hiccups in the encryption that shows that somebody paused, took it, decrypted, re-entered. Hypothetically speaking, I don't know how this stuff works, but the point is, this is stupid. The Russians have this. They release this as very effective information warfare, and it's operating on multiple levels. And I think you saw the frustration of Pistorius, the defense minister. I mean, never once did he say, was he like, well, the Russians caught us, and he's like, shame on the Russians for publicizing this information of our malfeasance. It's hybrid warfare. The Russians are to blame. The Russians are to blame for monitoring a conference where your guys were planning a war of aggression against Russia, and you were stupid enough not to secure it. But I think that this is, I think there's a big political hand in this. I think that, yes, the intelligence service, together with the foreign ministry, together with the presidential administration, have a little team together who are saying, what do we do with this? I think they called in Margarita Simeon and said, we need to get this out. Can you help us? And she's like, hell yeah. And she ran with it. Look, we do that in the United States. You're telling me that senior editors of the New York Times and the Washington Post have never been called into a meeting in the National Security Council where they went, we need to get a message out about something. So we're going to, oh, well, wait a minute. We don't have to hypothesize this. The head of NSA, the general back in the day, had said a couple years ago, he said, we get information and we release it. And he said, we like to get it to CNN because it gets out quickly. And we release information to CNN. Remember, he said, we've declassified everything. Even if it's garbage, even if we know it's wrong, we get it to CNN because we want to control the news cycle. We want to, create, perceptions. So we know the United States does this. And I feel that because otherwise the head of the SVR, if he had this Margarita Simeon, I mean, with all due respect to her, she's a journalist. She's not, her job isn't to work with the SVR, which is the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, as opposed to the FSB, which is their equivalent of the FBI. But she received this information. But if this was the real hack, the Russians would never, ever, ever have released this under any circumstance, because it's too hard to get in there. Once you get into something like this, you just sit there and you enjoy the ride as long as you can enjoy the ride.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
That if if you got an end, you don't want to give it up, because it's the long term. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and you ain't giving up. It's the goose that's laying the golden eggs, and knowing that if they're really going to attack you or do something, you're going to hear it first. So for any numbers of things, but ultimately, how do you think all this is affecting between the reality that, hey, Trump's the nominee. The Republicans ain't giving up no money for Ukraine or anything else, and that
I don't think so.
it looks like now, based on what I see, if things keep going in this direction, Trump will win, and he is not a pro NATO, pro Ukraine conflict. That ain't his. In fact, not only is it not his, it is clearly Biden's. And knowing Trump and how angry he is, he wants to, anything that has to do with Biden is like radioactive to him. He don't want to touch it. The horror, that's the shudder of horror that's going through Macron and Schultz, and they're fighting amongst each other and all. And these claims that somehow they're going to go they've had enough of this crap. They're going to go take on Vladimir Putin themselves and clean this thing up once and for all. Scott Ritter, it's senseless.
Tonight will be interesting because it's a State of the Union address tonight. It'll be interesting on a number of levels. Can Joe Biden stay upright for a long period of time?
Yeah, exactly.
How many times is he going to have to, take a sip of some sort of energy-inducing drink?
Yeah.
His energy. I don't know. I'm joking right now, but
no, you're not, because this guy's.
But it's interesting because up until Super Tuesday, Biden was very strong about Ukraine, very strong. We have to release this money. This is American leadership. This is that. This is this. This is that. This is this. This is that. Super Tuesday comes. I haven't heard Biden say a word about Ukraine. Now everything's a refocus on the economy. How do we focus on the economy? Border security, all domestic problems, because Biden also took a look at it and realized that if an election was held today, he'd lose. I mean, he's down to 38% support. Trump is, it appears based upon, the sentiment coming out of Super Tuesday that Trump would be able to secure enough electoral college votes to win re-election. So Biden is now in a position where he has to jettison garbage and focus on things. And frankly, Ukraine is garbage, pure unadulterated garbage. This was Victoria Nuland's pet project. I hope everybody understands what I'm saying. There's no national security value to the United States of Ukraine. Well, Russia's going to win. Yes, they are. And you know what? After they win, your life will be exactly the same, because Russia's going to invade Poland. No, they're not. Not unless Poland invades Russia first, which, if Emmanuel Macron has his way, could happen, but hopefully it won't. Russia's going to invade the Baltic states. No, not unless they do something stupid like try to strangle Kaliningrad to death, the Russian enclave, something stupid like that, in which case they disappear. But the point is, Russia has no intention of doing this. Russia wants to clean up Ukraine, clean up this problem, which Victoria Nuland made. I just want to point this out. She is evil, literally evil. She is the wicked witch of was it the West or the East? Which one got hit by
all of the above? Well, I guess since she's Western Europe, we'll say the West.
Yeah, the West.
And her people are from Eastern Europe, so we'll give her both. She's just a wicked witch.
Well, she's not Galina. Galina, the beautiful blonde who comes in floating on bubbles. That's not her. No. She's the other one. But
the green one with the warts on her nose.
You and your little dog too. But I mean, it's becoming clear. I hope it becomes more and more in focus is that, again, the revelations that are coming out from Ukraine about how much Vladimir Putin wanted peace and the role Victoria Nuland played in perpetuating war. Why it's the right move for the United States to divorce itself from the Nuland policy and seek damage control. Damage control is never about doing the right thing. It's damage control. It's not about, total radically changing policy. But I think you're going to see a de-emphasis, which is one of the reasons why Zelensky's wife isn't coming to the State of the Union. She was supposed to sit next to Joe Biden. But now I guess Yulia Navalnaya is coming because, we're there and she's taking umbrage at that. But I also think it's because Ukraine's not going to be the focus of the president's speech like it was in years past. I think that the president's going to be focused on Donald Trump and domestic American politics. And I think that's the direction the United States is heading. Now we have one more important step, though. We have to get our allies in sync with us. Remember, prior to this, Victoria Nuland was out there pushing Germany forward. Remember, Germany, Schultz didn't want to send helmets.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll send some helmets. We'll send some some handy wipes. We'll send, toothpicks. But he didn't want to do anything big. And then we pressure, especially about the Leopard tank. And he sent lots of Leopard tanks. He sent Marder infantry fighting vehicles. He sent artillery ammunition. He sent all this stuff. He leaned forward for us. France, you remember, Emmanuel Macron was the guy who was saying, we don't want Europe to be caught as the battleground of a war between two superpowers, the United States and Russia, that we need to start thinking about an independent European, security, alliance that's not NATO, that doesn't include the United States. He's the one saying all this stuff just recently too. And now, though, we put pressure on him. So Macron leans forward aggressively, helping push the Germans, lean forward, get the British in. So you have Europe finally sitting there going, lean in. And America goes, we're done. I'm sorry. We had a bad political moment. And Macron's, I have to be careful. He's angry. You can see it in his eyes. He's angry. He's furious at America. Furious. And I think one of the reasons why is that Victoria Nuland was out, doing the round saying, keep leaning forward, Emmanuel, keep leaning forward. Push harder. It's like, and then all of a sudden she's gone. And America's saying, we're sort of going this other direction right now. And he's like, you're making us look like idiots. Yes, because you are idiots, because you believed us. You believe Victoria Nuland. You thought she was actually going to be around forever and do all this. No, she's done. Our policy's done. You've leaned forward. We need to get the French and the Germans back in sync. And the way I would do it is I would tell, just my own fantasy world, probably shouldn't do it because we're talking about it's supposed to be hard facts, but I would just remind the French and the Germans that, we have a very dangerous situation for NATO. You guys, NATO is on the rocks. If Trump is elected, NATO may not exist at the end of his term. It definitely won't exist if his vice president gets elected. You're a dying organization. And if you create a political problem for me in an election year, all you do is make Trump stronger. And then when Trump comes in, the resentment that will build up will be backed by resentment within America, and you really will be sold down the river. So you need to realign with me and do whatever I'm doing to try and resolve this Ukrainian problem so that it isn't a problem come election day, because your best hope of survival is for me to stay president of the United States. So get on board or do your independent thing. But if you do it, you don't have America's backing. Because right now, Macron, you're talking about Europeans not being cowards. How brave will you be when I tell you there won't be American cavalry riding to your rescue? Because Macron, you can't generate more than 30,000 troops to send to Ukraine. That's it, baby. That's all you got. And when they're gone, you ain't got nothing left. And that 30,000 isn't going to be heavily armored, because you don't have that many tanks, and you don't have that many artillery pieces, and you don't have any ammunition, and your Air Force is a pathetic joke. You think that you're going to go there and you're going to be backed by America in Article 5. You're not. I'm telling you right now, Article 5 won't apply. You're going to die. If you want to be brave and commit suicide, do it, but you're not going to do it with me. That's what we need to tell the French, and we need to tell the same thing to the Germans. Cease and desist. This nonsense of leaning forward for Ukraine is over. The Ukrainian gambit failed, and we need to find an off-ramp, and you need to jump on board and help me get that off-ramp before November comes along, or else NATO is finished. Something like that maybe I live in a fantasy world, so I get a little ahead of myself sometimes, but I do think that something like that is happening right now, because Biden has to make Ukraine go away by November.
Something interesting happened in Europe. The ruling elite, the Macrons, the Schultzes, the Sunaks, their problem is not just over here. Their people are pissed. They ain't happy. Same issue Biden has. The people here ain't happy. His constituents are saying, we don't like you. We're not going to vote for you. Uncommitted, whatever. And you've got, George Galloway, a guy who his party, what is his history? He is a socialist. His party is the Workers' Party of Great Britain. He's unambiguous about his politics. However, he just slaughtered, annihilated the Tories and Labor. And guess who voted for him? Conservatives voted for him and supported him. Socialists voted him for so people who are neither voted for him. Everybody voted for him. When he said Gaza, I'm done with you. It's clear what his position is. He's where we are when it comes to Ukraine and in Russia. He tells the truth about it. When it comes to Gaza, this is a genocide. It needs to stop. This is unreasonable. He is a real politician. The people in Britain didn't say, well, he's a socialist, he's this, he's the far right, he's far left. They said, I hear something here that sounds like a pushback to the ruling elite. I want some of that. And he blew them out. Total. Now he's saying, we're going to run candidates all over the place. Yeah. And we're going to take all of you guys out. We'll take the whole parliament. And the people in the UK and all over Europe got to say, uh-oh, this is a problem. Because if this happens, then the ruling elite, I mean, you know, there are people there that want their heads. And I mean, both literally and figuratively on a platter. Your thoughts on this Galloway thing? I think it's huge.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, I've been a very close friend of George Galloway since before the lead up to the Iraq War, 2003.
Yeah. His famous speech, one of the great speeches on Iraq.
Great speech. But he and I worked together. I think we first came together. There was a Iraqi girl who had cancer, and she couldn't get the medicine because of sanctions, and so she was brought to the United States, and I worked with George Galloway to try and to bring the attention to that this was a success story. And then I went over there and met with George. I walked side by side with him in the giant London peace rally that led off. That was sort of intimidating, going to Hyde Park and speaking to all those people. But he's a good man. He's just a fundamentally good man, and he believes in the right things. Look, he's a socialist. I'm not. And so this is a very strange friendship, because I think if we got down to the nuts and bolts, first of all, I would never have a debate with George Galloway about the nuts and bolts of politics. It's just,
I wouldn't debate George Galloway, period. I ain't getting in the ring with that guy.
No, I mean, even on something that I'm really comfortable with, he's just, I mean, you know, his rhetorical flair, he's just, I mean, he will kill you. I've been watching him. I loved, he testified, you know, before the U.S. Senate back after the Iraq War, where he was accused of basically committing treason and all this stuff. And I think, I forget the name of the senator from Wisconsin that brought him in, and thought that he, you know, because everybody, even myself, were saying, George, don't come to America. Damn, he came to America. Don't have a public testimony before the Senate, because they're sneaky. They're going to get you to say something, and you're going to get arrested. And the British government doesn't like you. And they, you know, come on, George. George went, no, I got this. He went in there and he blew them away. Anybody who wants to go and look at that, he destroyed. You just could see that senator going, this was the biggest mistake in the world. This was supposed to be, you know, a chainsaw cutting George down. And I'm looking at a buzzsaw coming right at me, and it terminated his political existence. He didn't win re-election after that. I've seen Galloway debate at Oxford and just win a crowd over just by the strength, the moral strength of his argument, but also the clarity of his argument and the emotion of his argument, the combination. So I'm a huge George Galloway fan, And so that colors, Coleman, that's right. Coleman from Minnesota. Thank you very much. Not Wisconsin. I'm old. I guess Wisconsin, Minnesota, they're up there cheese. God, it's a good thing I'm not a national politician. I just lost both states. But, I think this victory is just like you said. It's not a one of. It's an indication that there is a undercurrent of need in Great Britain for a politician who will do the bidding of the people and not do the bidding of power politics of the political elite and all that. And Galloway's victory was overwhelming. And George Galloway just scared the living you-know-what out of people when he said, and now we're going to go around and we're going to pick different constituencies and we're going to start plucking you off. And next thing you know, it won't be George Galloway standing alone. It'll be George Galloway standing with 20 members of parliament who are a swing vote, and they can't be ignored. You know, the last prime minister questions, they didn't call upon him. Well, if George Galloway now is head of a movement of people, they will have to call upon him. They will have to call upon, his fellow parliamentarians. And this could be interesting because neither the Labour nor Tory party right now has the respect of the British people. I mean, Labour is so pathetic. They know that the guy they got, Starmer, or his name.
Yeah, Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah, that he's horrible, but there's nobody to replace him. I mean, that's how bad it is. It's sort of like in America.
Kind of like the Democrats, huh?
Yeah, it's like Biden's bad, but who's going to replace him? No, so no, he's horrible, and the Tories are just as equally bad. So, I mean, Rufi Sunak is he's Labor, right? Is Sunak he's Labor?
Sunak, it's a sad state of affairs when it doesn't matter, but he's a Tory. He's a
Tory. So yeah, Johnson, you're right. He's a Tory.
He wasn't elected. He was stuck in it. They haven't even elected anybody.
Galloway makes that point.
Him into office.
I was elected. You didn't get a single vote. And I think that so Galloway is going to, I think, become. God, I wish America had this. I mean, it would be nice if we could get a genuine independent party. Who knows? Maybe maybe RFK Jr. can do something. But again, to be honest, the policy that got Galloway elected was
Gaza,
what happened in Gaza, and you got Biden, who is totally complicit in the genocide. Trump just came out and said, I'm 100% with Israel, no questions. And RFK Jr. said the same thing. So the one issue that generated this moral outrage in England, it can't get any traction because none of the three candidates, the two major party candidates and the significant independent, they don't differ. They're the same on Israel across the board. So it's there, but I'm excited for George Galloway. I really am excited for him. I mean, it's the right thing to happen in a democracy, but it's also entertaining as hell. Yeah. I love nothing more than watching political elites just panic, and there's panic right now. I just also pray for his safety because we are in the when you get into this area of political extremism and extreme viewpoints. In Israel and in Gaza and Hamas, your people aren't willing to say that you have a legitimate right to disagree. It becomes a moral issue, and they use terms like evil, and they equate you to terrorist. And next thing you know,
Julian Assange.
So yeah, I need George Galloway to be around for a long time. Exactly. So I pray for his safety.
Yeah, same here. I also know the elite ruling class throughout Europe is scared to death because there are people in Europe, in France, in Germany, in Denmark, and on, looking at Galloway saying, I'm going to do that. Saying, oh, that worked and he won, saying, I'm going to do that. And if they do it in those countries, they will have similar outcomes. Speaking of Israel, there's been much talk about Israel. The Israelis constantly, we're going in up north and we're going to take we're going to give Lebanon and Hezbollah what for, why not, and do it, and don't do it again. Right. There's a lot of woofing about what they're going to do to Lebanon. I've gotten from various sources. I've heard that apparently these Golani brigade guys went up and they did some forays into southern Lebanon. Didn't work out well. They got ran out. Is Israel bluffing? I mean, here's the way I look at it right now. Man, economically, Israel's dead as a doornail. They can't keep doing this. And if they do, how do they come the hell out of it? They're nothing but a welfare state, total welfare state right now, a collapsed economy. They went into Gaza to fight a bunch of guys with RPGs and machine guns. And man, they took a pretty good thrashing. They've been taking the Gaza, the Hamas, etc., doesn't have to win. They just got to fight them tough, and they fought them tough. And but are they stupid enough to go into South Lebanon? And is the whole Israeli project running out of gas? Because they go into South Lebanon, they ain't coming out of that, intact. Anyway, your thoughts, Israel in the north.
The Israelis right now are in a predicament. You hit something on the head. The economy. What the Houthi have done to strangle the Israeli economy is real. It's the economy is hurting. It's shrunk by 20%, and it's going to shrink more. It's a bad investment right now. And something interesting is happening in Israel. People are leaving. Hundreds of thousands of people are leaving Israel. Now, they did this during the 1991 Gulf War too, and they came back. But Israel's becoming a place where it's pretty much uninhabitable. That's just the reality of it. Something else has happened too. Russia has done something extraordinarily interesting. They brought Hamas and the Palestinian Liberation Organization together in Moscow to try and create a new political singularity, because you know that Fatah and Hamas fought that civil war back in 2005, and we've had Fatah governing the West Bank, we've had Hamas governing Gaza, and they don't like each other. Israel has said, and the United States has backed them up, that Hamas, the movement, cannot be allowed to govern in Gaza. It must be destroyed, eliminated. Well, Israel's conflict in Gaza just made Hamas the most relevant political movement in all of Palestine. But the Russians understand that the United States and Israel, that's a talking point that is going to be difficult to overcome. If they say we won't sit at the table with Hamas, how do you get them at the table? So the Russians, said, well, they sort of took a page out of the book of the United States. You remember when we went into Syria and we started working with the YPG, everyone went, but the YPG is just an extension of the PKK. Now we're talking about Kurdish groups.
Right.
The PKK is the Turkish Kurdish Party, People's Party. It's a terrorist group by the United States. We call it a terrorist group. And the YPG is a terrorist group. And we're sitting there saying, well, we want to work with them and give them all the sophisticated stuff to help them be our proxy in the conflict against ISIS and against Assad. And people are going, but you can't. They're terrorists. So we flew in a general who sat down with them and said, why don't you guys just rename yourself? You're going to become the Syrian Democratic Forces. And they went, okay. And the Syrian Democratic Forces aren't terrorists. They're the Syrian Democratic Forces. And we're going to work with them. And everyone went, oh, okay. You just renamed them. They're the same people, same terrorists, da-da-da. Russia understands that Hamas as a political entity is there. But they told Hamas that you're going to have to, if you want to bring an end to this conflict, if you want to have a Palestinian state, we've got to overcome this hurdle. And so they're working together, whether or not it succeeds, because there's a lot of bad blood between Hamas and the PLO. But the Russians right now are trying to get them to come together to create a single political movement where Hamas is renamed and now is integrated. But it'll be called something else. And this is a masterstroke because it takes away one of the big arguments that Israel and the United States had, that you can't deal with Hamas politically. Well, Hamas has gone away.
It gives Israel an out, really. It gives Israel an out.
Well, the Russians aren't stupid. They're pretty smart. It gives America an out, too.
Yeah.
Militarily, Hamas isn't losing. I think you said it right. And I said it when it first happened. Hamas wins by surviving, just like Hezbollah in 2006 won by surviving. But they're doing more than surviving. They're inflicting horrific losses on Israel. Even the head of the Israeli armed forces came out and said that we haven't suffered losses like this in our entire history. And there's evidence that the Israelis aren't telling the whole truth about the number of casualties that they've suffered. So everybody's sitting there going, well, Israel's kicking butt and taking names. Not necessarily. They haven't won Gaza. And that's a problem for them. The fact that Benny Gantz, who was on, who was the opposition, brought in to create this war cabinet to bring about political unity, flew to the United States without the permission of Benjamin Netanyahu to have meetings with the Biden administration, shows that there's a split right now within the Israeli ranks. Israel is making noise about moving on to Hezbollah, because Hezbollah has been hurting them. Hezbollah has been carrying out this sustained, half war It's just a game of escalation management where they hit Israel hits them, but not enough to call it a war. Then they hit again, then Israel hits again. And they've been doing this, but Israel's taken big losses, not just in terms of manpower and equipment. I mean, tanks and stuff. Hamas has been blinding them, taking out their the intelligence capabilities that give them deep strike potential, etc. Hamas is very very selective in their targeting, and it's genius to watch them just take apart the Israeli system. And the Israelis are saying if this continues much longer, we are going to be at such disadvantage. So we need to act now. They've been trying to get Hezbollah to carry out a precipitate, but Hezbollah is pretty smart. For instance, just the other night, Hezbollah fired a whole bunch of rockets at Kiryat Shimon. Now, under normal circumstances, if you flatten Kiryat Shimon, that could be the reason why Israel goes in. But Hamas fired these old. I mean, you're watching the rockets go up, and they're not guided. They're just a bunch of 107 millimeter Katyushkas being fired. And Israel, meanwhile, and they cost $500, $1,000, $5,000 per. Israel, meanwhile, is popping off the Iron Dome. Pop, 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 pop. It's a huge light show overhead. And Hezbollah, you got the Hezbollah, accountant back there going, 5 million, 10 million. They're bankrupting Israel right now, and they're blowing through Israel's thing. Remember, a while ago, Israel was running out of Iron Dome ammunition. We had to fly in an emergency supply from our stocks. Now we have production up, and Hamas isn't sending as many rockets over, so they're starting to stabilize. But Hezbollah is sending the signal, and I think that's why they did it to Israel. We know how many rockets you have left in Iron Dome, and we know that we can cause you to fire all these rockets, and that we have hundreds of thousands of precision guided rockets still in existence that can strike you. We don't want to go there. The other thing that Hezbollah and the Israelis know is that the war won't be fought in southern Lebanon. The war will be fought in northern Israel. That Hezbollah has made a strategic decision that they weren't going to let Israel take the war to Lebanon. At least I didn't do it this time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that always happens with me.
But so that's the that's what's going on there. It's I don't think Israel wants a war. They're making talk to put pressure on the United States, to put pressure on Hamas to bring this conflict to an end. Hamas doesn't want Hezbollah in it either. All the leverage that Hamas enjoys today is because of the massacres that Israel are committing, the genocide Israel's committing against the Gazan population. If the war spreads into southern Lebanon, the world will be talking about a different level of violence. The Palestinian people will be forgotten. They'll become a footnote in a larger conflict. And neither Hamas nor Hezbollah want that. So I think that this is a lot of posturing, but I think that that neither side wants the war. That doesn't mean a war can't happen. When you have this much tension, you have this much, forward leaning, things could spin rapidly out of control. But I think everybody understands the consequences of a expanded war between Hezbollah and Israel will be devastating for both parties. But the most important thing is that Israel won't win.
Yeah. The Russia-China thing, lastly, we got a second here. So Russia says they've decidedly moved to say we're not going to just support Israel blindly. They're moving to try to take concrete steps to address this thing in a diplomatic manner. Meanwhile, China comes out last week and they say the Palestinians under international law have a right to defend themselves via armed struggle. A huge move. I don't know for sure, but I have read great speculation that the Russians and Chinese aren't upset with the Houthis, shall we say. A lot of speculation about that. Your thoughts on those things before we go? Last question.
Well, I mean, this is big. The Israelis have had deep diplomatic relations with Russia, linked to the fact that so many Russian Jews and Jews from the former Soviet Union are currently reside in Israel. There's familial ties, et cetera, economic ties, political ties, historical ties, things of that nature. And Israel, I mean, just to show you how close Israel and the Soviet Union, Israel and Russia have been over time. When Jonathan Pollard stole the crown jewels of the American intelligence community, the book of books that had all the frequencies that were intercepted, how we intercepted, and what we were getting from, et cetera. gave it to the Israelis. The Israelis in turn gave it to the Russians, to the Soviets. And so that, that just tells you, Israel's supposed to be the great American ally, but no, they have very close relations with the Russians. They have the great close relations with the Chinese as well. Back when Israel was developing a fighter called the Lavi fighter, and it was made extensive use of F-16 technology, exclusive proprietary technology. The Israelis, we ended up taking a spy satellite photograph of an airfield in China where a Lavi fighter was there. The Israelis had taken the Lavi over there and were taking American technology through the Lavi project and giving it to the Chinese so the Chinese could get their fighter planes up. So Israel has deep connections with China, security-related connections with China. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is for China now and Russia to take the steps that they're taking. They're basically saying, we are divorcing you, Israel. You're no longer our secret best friend. You're no longer the little hidden secret we have in the closet that everybody knows about but nobody wants to talk about. We're done. And the world's going that direction. Israel right now is in a huge problem because even when this conflict ends, what's the future of Israel? As you said, their economy is trashed. Their economy is not going to get any better. There's a real danger that Israel will find itself depopulated. As the going gets tough, the weak get going. In order to survive, Israel is going to have to win over an international community. It's going to require them to do things like crack down on West Bank settlers who have stolen property. They're going to have to evict it. This is going to create huge domestic problems. And if Israel turns on them and breaks them, you're going to see a lot of people who have come to Israel solely to steal land from the Palestinians. That's all it is. And once they realize that Israel is no longer going to give them carte blanche to rape, pillage, and murder, they're going to leave. They're going to come back to Brooklyn, where most of them come from. I only pray that America bars their entry, and if they come in, we arrest them and put them in jail for rape and murder and all the other things they've done to the Palestinian people. But and then if you take a look at the origins, you got Israeli spokesmen that come from Australia and come from New Zealand and come from England. They're going to go back to those countries, and they're going to go back to Poland. They're going to go back to Italy, back to Spain. They're going to flee Israel because Israel is going to become that's the danger for Israel right now. No matter how this conflict ends, Israel is becoming the whole idea of Israel's future was built on predicated, and we saw this with Biden. Remember when he was in Mumbai, the India Middle East Economic Corridor. And then we saw Netanyahu come up to the General Assembly, and instead of bringing his Iranian bomb, he brought a map that showed Israel as the critical element of this Indian Middle East Economic Corridor. Israel's future was defined by its economic interoperability with a region of friends, people who believed in Israel, were going to have diplomatic relations with Israel. And this is an Israel that was already crushing the Palestinians. Everybody had divorced the Palestinians. That world no longer exists. The world now is on the side of the Palestinians. If this conflict doesn't end before Ramadan, the Arab street is going to rise up and compel these conservative Arab, autocracies to put even more pressure on Israel. Israel doesn't have any economic sustainability. The India Middle East Economic Corridor is dead. There is no economic off-ramp for Israel. I think Israel has committed suicide. They just don't realize it. It's like, sitting there drinking the tea that's laced with, polonium or something like that, going, damn. Now, it's not going to kill you for 10 years, but you're going to die. You just committed suicide, long-term suicide. Your body isn't going to recover from that. What Israel has done with the Palestinians is literally drinking a poison pill. I don't think Israel survives this conflict. I'm not saying that they're going to go away tomorrow. I'm saying that long term, this Zionist experiment, the greater Israel, isn't going to survive.
Yeah, it's like I worked for a company one time that was right after I retired from law enforcement, and they were doing great, and then they sold out. These venture capitalists bought them and blah. And the people that were the company for years said, we looked at the model. And it looked good at the time, but we said, this is not economically viable. It's going to fall. And everybody started leaving. You can look at Israel and you can say, it's not economically viable. If a country is not economically viable, if the people in your region won't do business with you and they despise you, if people around the world look at you and they say, there's something going on in Germany where there's these Israeli dates and the Germans are protesting because the supermarkets had to repackage them and take the Israel name off of them, or they couldn't sell them. And now they're protesting the repackaging of them. So if your products are radioactive around the world, it's over for it. And based on what's happening, we know how politicians are. Based on what's happening with Galloway, if enough politicians see that their career, just like they say, hey, my career is strong as long as I support Israel. If they wake up one day and they realize that their career is weak based on Israel, some of those same politicians, they don't give a crap. They want to keep their seat. And if it becomes, if you switch around, you keep your seat, they will turn on Israel. A lot of them will turn on Israel. It ain't about Israel. It's about number one. And we will see. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Scott Ritter. Don't forget, everybody, go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. That's Scott Ritter's website, where you can find all of his good work. And most importantly, you can go there and you can donate and help keep Scott, all the work he's doing. He's doing documentaries. He has to travel. He has to pay the bills. So go there and support Scott Ritter and his good work. Also, you see everything scooting across the bottom here if you can donate, or just follow me on all the various social media platforms. And last but not least, share this on all your social media platforms and hit the like button. Thanks a lot, everybody. We're gone.